What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of SSP Live. Wow, I messed that up for like the first time. I feel like another edition of SSPN Live and a
Mm,
pregame NBA Cup with a chance to advance to the quarterfinals edition of SSPN Live as the San Antonio Spurs take on the Phoenix Suns with a chance to clinch a spot in the NBA Cup. I
mm.
think me and Ethan agree here. The real tournament that we care about is the one in April, May, and June. But with how the past two Spurs seasons have gone, I think we'll take
Yeah,
where the Spurs are sitting right now in the NBA Cup.
we're a few years away from April, May, and June, like actually being a possibility. But right now, the in-season tournament, that cup is fully within grasp. Jude, I think it's honestly designed for teams like us that are kind of becoming more competitive, but aren't quite there yet. It's a shorter spurt, and I think we have the stamina to actually make a run in this single game elimination type of a tournament.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to go to one of the NBA Cup games earlier this year against the Lakers. And as much as I kind of let off that episode, recapping that episode, saying, or let off the episode where we recapped that game, um, with kind of saying the same sentiment that, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Still, the vibes in the building, as well as a semi-playoff environment and
Right.
playoff intensity for a young team like the Spurs, it's great growing experience. And without those stipulations when it comes to the in-season tournament, the games might not be as intense. You may not have that type of environment. And as much as it's still not going to be the playoffs, it is a nice little simulated playoff
Mhm.
experience for teams like us. So I completely agree with your point there. But since we last spoke, the Spurs have gone 2-1. We
Mhm.
talked to you guys last Monday before the Utah and LA back to back. And then the Spurs also played this past Sunday against the Sacramento Kings. That was a thrilling victory, to say the least. But we're not going to jump too far ahead. We're going to go back and cover everything we missed. And then we'll wrap up the show kind of going in depth on some of the stories to watch here in this Suns Spurs NBA Cup game.
Mm. Yes, sir. Let's do it.
First off, we got the Texan Spurs. What's up, fellas? Shout
Mm.
out from SMTX. Shout out to you, my
Whoa.
guy. Me and Ethan's old stomping grounds there. Without old SMTX, me and Ethan and SSPN would have never became a thing. So
Sh Shout out Ocarina Springs Drive, baby. Represent.
there you go. Two Clutch Corey in the chat as well, and Caesar C also being here. We appreciate you guys for sure. But let's jump in to this Utah game last Tuesday. The Spurs won 128 to 115. Let me get the box score up here. And there we go. Um, so as you guys can see, this was the last NBA Cup game that the Spurs played in to move to 2-1 in Group B, which is setting up that game against Phoenix tonight. But this was kind of a similar story as well, actually, I was going to say it was a similar story as some of the other Jazz games in the past. I guess you could say that about Game 2. Well, Game 3 as uh, it wasn't as, or it was closer than I thought it was, or that I was going off memory. So actually what I was going with in the beginning, Ethan, that is what I was thinking. Very competitive first half, even a little bit of a competitive third quarter, but in the fourth quarter, in the second half, the
Yeah.
Spurs end up pulling away again against the Jazz. 24 points in the first half for Wemby in this game, 34 7 and 2 with 3 blocks as well, 6 for 14 shooting, 13 for 23 overall, 23 points from Stephon Castle in this one. A big showing from him in this one. This was really kind of the Area 51 game, where that's becoming, that nickname with those two is becoming even more of a moniker. And when we were talking pre-stream, I was like, this is the game I remember the least. But now that I'm looking at this, I'm remembering basically how this one went. And honestly, the box score is not lying here. 9 of Champagne's 15 points were in the fourth quarter of this game, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
So it really was Wemby and Stephon carrying us. Which, I mean, that feels really good. It's not to say that this was a perfect game. We're not trying to sit here and say everything's great, but to see them do that in a game I don't think we had necessarily seen where it was just them two for, the majority of like the first 3 quarters of this game. The reason that we were hanging around or having a slight lead had a lot to do with them. The box score around them was much more empty going into the fourth quarter.
Right. I think it's really cool that the narrative going into this game was like, man, Stefan Castle has a lot more in his bag than people had anticipated. You and I had talked about that, I think, in our pregame. And then, sure enough, 23 points. And like you said, that first half was crazy for him. And he had a clutch three, I think, as well in that fourth quarter and was able to finish with 23 points. For me, the biggest team stat differentiator is going to be the turnovers. We only had 10 to their 21. And when you can cut their turnovers in half like that, you immediately know that our half court offense was at least in sync and we weren't making silly plays, which has kind of been our Achilles heel early in the year. And then we also out rebounded them, not crazy, but 30 to 24. That's something as a place where we have struggled. It's where we struggled against the Lakers. We were completely outmatched size wise. And when you struggle on the boards, oftentimes you lose these games. But that fourth quarter, man, Julian Champagny, Chris Paul, I think his poise, he was really responsible for a lot of those passes, him and Stephon. And you got to give Victor credit too. Obviously, we talk about him at length, but he scored 24 of his points in the first half, only 10 in that second half. But he was still instrumental down the stretch in creating open shots for other guys, whether that be a decoy or as a playmaker. So it's really great, like you said, to see things finally coming together in that fourth quarter. Because I mean, if you think about it, Jude, all of our biggest struggles weren't
Yeah.
struggles in this game: turnovers, rebounding, and then executing in that fourth quarter. We succeeded in all three of those categories in this one.
Yeah, and again, y'all can correct me in the comments on any of this because this was about a week ago at this point. Shout out about a week ago. I
Mm,
had to say that after that. Keldon Johnson, I believe most of
yes.
his points in this game, as much as he went 3 for 9, most of his free throw attempts and the majority of his 10 points also came in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
So as much as it may not be the prettiest box score, still the fact that he turned up in the biggest moments was crucial for us to get that 10-point victory in the fourth to kind of run away with this one. Also, huge shout out to Mamu Kelishvili and Blake Wesley
Yes.
in this one. This is probably one of Blake's best games ever. He was catching passes off cuts, getting easy layups at the top of the under the rim. There were a couple assists from Wemby in that. And, in years past, there were so many passes to guys like Malachi or Blake, not to single them out, but, they'd get a great pass from Wemby and then it'd turn into a miss, because of just a lack of control, under the basket or wherever the shot may be. That was not the case in this one from Blake. Made a 3 as well, had 4 assists of his own, 2 steals as well. Trey Jones 1 for 6, but still had 2 steals and 7 assists in this one. So yeah, maybe not the best shooting night for Trey, but still a connective piece off the bench with 19 minutes nonetheless. But definitely the main other 2 shout outs that I wanted to give was Mamu and Blake Wesley in this game.
Yeah, this is exactly what you want from Blake. I think Mamu too. I mean, we know what to expect from Mamu, and he's perfect from the field. That's even better. But Blake Wesley is a little more hot and cold, I would say, in terms of his play. But I love the Twitter interactions. People were like, Blake Wesley plus 34 tonight. Like, where the heck did that come from? And it's like if you watch his game when he's right, he's really right. And it's his
Mm-hmm.
intensity, it's his focus, it's his improved control, like you said, that allows him to be a point of attack defender, a high pace player. And when you're getting up and down the court as this young team with guys running right and left of you, it's really easy to get easy baskets and just playing the right way in the half court, like you were saying, off of cuts, off of screens, off of pin downs, and just converting on those easy buckets, which last year was a struggle for him.
What do you know, Ethan? A player in his 3rd season developing.
It's bound to happen, Jude. It's bound to happen. I know we're holding everybody more accountable because we're more
Right.
competitive, but you still have to keep a little bit of reality with him, Malachi Branham, CD Sissoko, some of these guys that aren't quite Victor,
Yeah.
Devin, and Stefan. Like they're still good players. Like they can develop into at least very solid role players if we just give them the time.
Yeah, and when you talk about execution, I mean that's exactly what Blake did in this game. Wasn't trying
Hmm.
to do too much, more controlled. And the other thing that I'm noticing, Blake's minutes are inconsistent right now.
For
He
sure.
got 22 in this one and he showed up, but the thing that I loved about the Sacramento game where he got no minutes, if I remember correctly, not to jump around, but just to talk about Blake, he was the first guy on the bench celebrating.
Yeah.
When Devin's hitting threes, we're coming back, like So that's the type of thing that, I mean, that's really all you can ask right now from Blake Wesley. When he's not getting those minutes, he's not demoralized, he's not unengaged, he's still engaged. And when you
Mhm.
do call on his number and give him 22 minutes like we did in this game, he executed and had one of the better games of his career.
Right, and I don't wanna crap on Trey, like, I know he has
Right.
a lot of positives, but he did go 1 for 6. He was
Hmm.
negative in the plus minus, and to be honest, as a scorer, he's been a little lackluster in the first, 20 games of the year. So,
Yeah.
there's opportunity for him if he can continue to take advantage of these spot minutes when they come.
Well, and I think a perfect example of that is Zach Collins, only 6 minutes
Yep.
in this game, 12 for Mamu because they liked that matchup, and also saw some Charles Bassey in this one with 5 minutes as
Mhm.
well. But another key aspect of this game that I do just have to mention is Laurie Markkinen did get hurt in the second half. So, like, that is key context when you look at that fourth quarter and you
Right.
see the 10-point win. Their best player was off the floor. But what I will say is when you go down here and you look at his numbers when he was on the floor, we were doing some good things defensively on him, especially from Wemby. Held him to 0 of 6 from 3 and 5 for 14 overall, just 14 points. Was
Mm.
still, a factor on the boards with 8 himself. But, we were forcing other guys like Bryce Sensabaugh and Keontae George and Colin Sexton, as much as Colin Sexton and John Collins are kind of guys that already score for them. But we were like Keontae George and Bryce Sensabaugh, forcing them to make threes as much as they did kind of execute. Both of them above 50% on threes in this game, which was kind of crazy. We were forcing those guys to shoot. And obviously, again, some of those buckets as well, without Laurie on the floor in the fourth quarter, that's going to give those guys more opportunities. But the main thing that I noticed with both of those two guys, Keontae kind of scored more in the fourth because he's a starter anyway. But Bryce Sensabaugh, we really kind of slowed down as the game went on after halftime
Mm.
adjustments and things like that. And that'll be the last thing that I'll kind of say on this game. But our second halves, man, I mean, the Kings game is a great example of it as well. We'll get into that. I mean, think about the third quarter, Ethan. It feels like now we're winning every third quarter, and that was like the biggest issue.
Yeah, or if not winning, at least being competitive. Because last
Hmm.
year we were being outscored by like 2 or 3. Like, it was like 30 points for them, 15 for us in that third quarter. At least now when we lose a third quarter, it's within single digits.
Right. Exactly. But definitely seeing a lot more of that this season. And this was kind of another example where the Spurs pulled away in the second half. But let's move on to the second half of this back to back, which is unfortunately the least positive game that we kind of have, other than that highlight that you see right there on the right corner, where Wemby put LeBron in a little bit of a spin cycle and was able to get a dunk. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter, Ethan, because that start that the Lakers had that you see up there, 32-23, as much as the other quarters were close, I watched the majority of this one and we were really, down around double digits for most of the game. And a lot of that, at least from my perspective, felt like it had to do with turnovers. We only had 2 more turnovers than them, but just discombobulation, messier offense. You want to give the Lakers some credit for sure. And the schemes that JJ was putting out and the way that they were playing us, because that definitely impacted the way that we played offensively and made it more of a struggle for us than otherwise. But also, my perspective from watching this game, and maybe this is just Spurs colored glasses, but I really felt like we had a lot of self-inflicted mistakes in this game, which kind of kept us at around that 10-point deficit. And it never really changed throughout the game.
That's definitely true. I'm gonna make it even of a simpler takeaway, Jude, or make it more of a I'm gonna simplify it.
Go
They
for it.
they had 58 points in the paint, we had 42, and we also got out rebounded 46-38. It's just size. They're getting easy baskets on the inside. We're not, because they have some lengthy defenders as well. And you got to give a shout out to the Lakers' defensive schemes. They've been on point thus far in the year. Um, and I'm not saying that the mistakes weren't there, but I think that's just like that's the most glaring difference in this game between the Lakers and the Spurs.
And I know that the Lakers only shot 38% in this game. But if you
From
look at most of the guys who were taking shots, like 3 for 6 from D'Angelo Russell, 2 for 4 from Rui, 3 for 6 from Austin Reeves. And then as much as you could say, oh, 4 for 10 from Dalton Connect, that's still 40%. And that's another thing I forgot to mention. Dalton Connect, the leading scorer in this game, dude, he was going off from outside. And same thing with D'Angelo Russell off the bench. And Max Christie, I haven't even mentioned Max Christie. He had 12 points off the bench for them as well. So when Max Christie's getting 12 points on top of really the full team effort here from the Lakers, we were able to slow down Anthony Davis in comparison to last time, at least scoring wise. Still had 14 boards and 7 assists, so definitely felt his impact on the interior, like you mentioned. But not only were they able to win in the paint, but they were able to snipe us from outside with a lot of their shooters who were in that role as well. But Dalton Connect really stuck out to me, man. He really was a perfect draft pick for them. It was one of those where I was like, man, oh, what if we kept that 8th pick and he was in the rotation? But also, I like the way that everybody's developing, and I'm sure that draft capital will be good down the line. But I'm pretty sure in our last draft preview that we did, Ethan, not to toot our own horn, both of us wanted Dalton Connect at 8.
And I still do. I think the only other option I would have taken was Cody Williams. But at the time, we were
Yeah,
like, but we want somebody that can contribute now, because we thought Stefan was going to be kind of a prospect.
right.
But who knew Stefan would actually be really a contributor for us. The only other note I would have on this game, Jude, is Keldon can't go 1 for 5, 4 points off the bench. Like, just
Facts.
when that happens, that's not great.
Yeah, especially against a team like the Lakers. And see, I forgot about that. So that is a really good point. These are the games where you need Keldon to get around 15. Um, yeah, I'm trying to just look at our team, see if there were any takeaways that I really have here. Obviously, some of the guys, you could say Stefan struggled shooting a little bit, but when I watched this game, I didn't think that Stefan played bad. Yes, you could say that he struggled shooting everywhere else on the floor. I still liked his impact. You could say the same thing for CP3 a little bit.
Yeah.
Champagny and Harrison Barnes, you got to give them some credit. They were able to make some shots and at least help us hang around, like I said, because we were always hanging around. And same thing with Devin. But the other thing, when you look at the bench, Devin was the only person on the team off the bench in double figures.
Big shout out to Julian Champagny. This can kind of be our transition into the Kings game, but he had
Uh-huh.
15 against the Jazz, 18 against the Lakers, and 19 against the Kings. And they haven't all been just like catch and shoot threes. Like a majority of them
Yeah.
have been, but he's taking guys off the dribble. He's getting easy baskets and transition. He's moving well off the ball as a cutter. Like, he definitely deserves his flowers. And if he continues to keep this up, like, I know he won't get mentioned, but most improved player consideration. I mean,
No,
the guy went
no.
from a two-way player that nobody wanted to now averaging 12, 5, and 2 on efficient shooting for the Spurs right now, and he's only getting better, because the beginning of the year was terrible, and now his trajectory's up
He probably, there's going to be too many other big names
for sure.
to
The
to
guy's
to make
averaging
it.
20 plus.
But if he could get close to 15, dude, like he might actually have a chance. Cause that's a because he wasn't like really doing much. I mean, yes, I know he played last year during injuries and stuff like that, but he was not getting 15 plus, consistently and getting consistent starting minutes. That's a whole nother lineup conversation that we're gonna have to get into. And also I do want to say, just for the people in the comments, we are going to answer some of your questions. We're just going to recap these games, and then when we get to the pregame preview, we'll get into those. But going back to Julian, to your point, half of his shots were not threes in this game, and also got to the line 3 times. One of those was an and one, and another one was just driving to the basket. So to your point, it is not just catch and shoot threes for Julian Champagny. Probably if I had to pick as of right now, the biggest surprise for me, other than kind of what you said earlier about how we thought Castle would be a little bit more of a developing player, but still there was like an outside chance. Okay, he's got a lot of potential. Like, that to me is less surprising than Champagny contributing the way that he is this year.
We didn't even know if he was going to crack the rotation, Jude. Like,
Or even make it through training camp, really.
and he's averaging in the last 10. I know there's only been 20 games, but the last 10 is averaging 13 and a half. Last year, he averaged 6.8 and 2.5 rebounds. So let's hope this continues for him, because I've been very happily impressed with him.
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say, man, think about Champagny's contract. Like, he was
So affordable.
him and Charles Bassey. We signed him on 4-year, 2 million, like team option, like almost every year. This is. I mean, It's early. What? We're 11-9 now, so we're 20 games into the season officially. So it's still, 64 games left, or excuse me, 62 games left. Um, but it feels like that he's the next Spur that we're just, Gary Neal, Danny Green, diamond in the rough, undrafted guy that we're going to develop and make a solid player. And to be honest, I don't even want to limit him to just Danny Green, Gary Neal, because his size and length, as well as how young he is as well. I don't necessarily want to put that type of cap on his potential. Not saying he's going to be a perennial all-star or anything. But those guys didn't have the physical tools that Julian does.
100%. 100%. Not to toot our own horns, Jude, but I believe we called Danny Green like when we very first got this guy, and we were like, "What can he be?"
I
And I was
think
like,
it was
"Maybe a
you.
Danny Green." Yeah, I
It
mean, yeah,
was more you than me, I'll be honest.
I appreciate that little shout out, but either way, it's slowly kind of becoming a fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And ironically, I believe, well, no, no, no. Well, yeah, Danny Green called the Jazz game. So that was one of Champagne's good games.
He's watching a mirror right there.
There you go. There you go. Would love to see Danny on the broadcast more on nights that Sean, it gets sick or something like that. Like obviously
Whoa, whoa.
we want Sean first. I'm just saying on backup nights, I'm down with DG. I'm down with the Green Ranger, Ethan.
Me too. The Green Ranger, 14.
You remember that? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Here we go. Spurs 127 to 125, their most recent game and their most recent win. Ethan, I watched this game full through. And as much as we did make a little bit of a comeback in the second quarter, we did not get the lead again, I believe, until it was either late in the third quarter or during the fourth quarter. The first half, I mean, that first quarter, we really got blown out. Like it was really, I think Trey Jones hit a buzzer beating three, if I'm correct, in this
Yes, he
one.
did.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's to end the first quarter, and that's what made it 42 to 28. So really, we got beaten that first quarter 42 to 25. And I mean, even when you go look at the Kings box score, still 23 from De'Aaron Fox. We'll talk about the shooting percentage, but 23 from De'Aaron Fox, 28 from DeMar DeRozan, 25 and 10, or excuse me, 25, 13 and 6 from Domantas Sabonis, and 12 of DeMar DeRozan's 28 all came in that first quarter. And a lot of those buckets, man, Keldon was matched up against him a lot. But dude, like I'm telling you, like I know we've talked about Keldon's defensive struggles, but there were like at least 3 shots where Keldon did everything he could, like defensively against DeMar, and it was just DeMar getting buckets on fadeaway mid-range jumpers. He did everything he could without fouling. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and he was just draining them. But this kind of ties into what I was talking about with the Jazz game, the resolve, the way that we fought back, won the last 2 quarters. And just never gave up despite a big deficit and things not going right for most of the first quarter and the first half of that second quarter.
Yeah, I only got to watch the first half and then like 4 minutes of the third quarter. Uh, we took the lead at the 7.5 minute mark ish
Okay.
off of Julian or we not take it, we tied it at the 7.5 minute mark with a Julian Champagny three, who was huge in this game, 4 of 9 from three with 19 points. But I think my biggest takeaway, like you said, was just the poise to stay together and slowly truck back into this game because there wasn't like one run.
Yes.
It felt like a bunch of mini runs, like a 6-2 run, 4-1 run, and they just slowly built over those last 3 quarters until finally we were able to win the game. And we almost lost it because wasn't it like a couple free throws and a couple bad calls that almost resulted in a Kings having a comeback? Or no. Here's what it was. It was a non-call on an apparent over the back Wemby on Sabonis on a missed free throw from Keldon, where Sacramento fans were like livid that they didn't call this over the back on Wemby, and then they reviewed it in the last 2 minute report, and it turned out it was Sabonis holding Wemby's arm.
Yes, exactly.
So it would have resulted in more Spurs points had it actually been called. But regardless, that's really my only takeaway from this game.
Yeah, and kinda like I said with the first quarter, you know, how I called it 42-25 because of
Yeah.
our buzzer beating 3. This was really 127-122. We just gave them a
Yeah.
wide open 3 at the end of the game, and they hit it as the buzzer went out. So this was really a 5-point win. Still very, hard-fought game for sure, and man, this has kinda become normal for us at this point, but I just wanna stop and appreciate 34, 3, 11, a steal, 14 boards on 11 of 14 shooting, 5 for 9 from 3 from, the mayor of San Antonio and Area 51, Victor Wembanyama.
I'll do you two better. Chris Paul, 13 points, 10 assists, 4 of 10 shooting, being the floor general that we had hoped he would be, Jude. And then, of course, off the bench, Devin Vassell had 21 points on 8 of 12 shooting, 5 of 8 from 3. That was huge. To me, this is the best game so far of Devin Vassell's season. Because I know he's been in and out of the lineup with injury, but to have 24 minutes and score 21 points coming back from injury on a minutes restriction in a game of this magnitude is massive.
And look at the efficiency as well from him.
Yep. This is what we're going to need from him. To the fact that this is going to be inserted into the starting lineup, potentially. Some people want him to stay on the bench,
Right.
but assuming he gets back into the starting lineup, that's going to be nightmarish because whoever stays on the bench is going to continue to perform at their level as well. Because this is a guy that we've just had on ice in the back room, Jude, and now he's actually starting to
Right.
contribute to important games. Like that's, and then Jeremy Sohan's waiting in the wings. He might play tonight.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you mentioned that. The Alamo Visual Archive mentioned that earlier in the comments, and that was something that I had heard about over the weekend, but just forgot about going into this episode after working today. So that is huge. Hopefully that can happen. Fingers crossed type of deal. But speaking of Devin and talking about this is what we need, Keldon Johnson as well off the
Mhm.
bench. This is what we need. 17 points, 4 rebounds, an assist as well on 6 for 10 shooting overall, 3 for 4 from 3 from Keldon. The thing I really liked about this Keldon game, most of his points, I believe, were in the second half, although he was efficient all night. Um, he wasn't trying to insert himself too much. He was kind of letting the game come to him and then executing. And a lot of times, Keldon does need to kind of drive to the basket and go get a shot to get his rhythm going. And there were still some transition tough layups off the glass,
Mhm.
in this game that were crucial down the stretch. But really for me, like only 10 shots and again, the efficiency on the threes as well. If we can have more floor spacing execution from Keldon, I mean, that can unlock a lot of things for our bench offense, as well as when, he's rotating in staggered minutes with some of the starters.
100%. And one other thing I want to take away from this. It felt like they were kind of game planning a little bit. I know he didn't shoot as well, but more of an emphasis on slowing down Stephon Castle.
Yes.
That's not something I expected yet, but teams are now having to account for his offense. So he only had 8 points, 3 turnovers, 1 assist. Not the best game from him overall. But when you try and slow him down, suddenly Chris Paul has less of an issue getting up the court. He's got 10 assists. Julian Champagny has 19 because you're doubling off of the corner man. So you're starting to see how
Exactly.
these things can really open up the rest of the floor.
I mean, and 19 points from Champagny again. A lot of those open looks are because of them having to key in on Stephon Castle. And I know I said this about the last one, and I'm not trying to sit here and be like, Stephon Castle never has bad games. But again, even watching this game, I really didn't like, my takeaway wasn't, oh, Stephon's horrible and it's standing out. It's like, again, yeah, he didn't shoot that great. And, the box score is pretty empty otherwise, but there's so many things that he does on the floor, man, that are impactful, whether it's his spacing, it's just where he positions himself on the floor. It ties back to his basketball IQ. I think the last time we talked, I kind of made the point that Stephon is very similar to Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, that by him being on the floor, that means one less guy is out of position. So, I mean, man, I think as much as definitely this is on the lower tier of Stephon Castle games this year,
Mhm.
even on nights like this, in my opinion, he still finds some positive ways to contribute.
I didn't realize this, Jude. This is kind of bonkers. Okay, so we lost rebounding 38-51. We lost turnovers 16-10, and we lost points in the paint 28-52. But we just shot the lights out. We hit 23 threes and they shot 12, or they made 12. So this is modern day NBA. If you could hit twice
Right.
as many threes, you might win the game.
There you go. There you go. Man, when it comes to this game, again, the takeaways, just to wrap it up, are pretty much the same, man. I mean, I do want to give a shout out to the way that we defended De'Aaron Fox. I almost forgot to mention Malik Monk. He's another dude who went off in this game. And Isaac Jones, I had never heard of him. He played a good game
Oh,
off the
yeah, he did.
bench as well. But still overcoming all of that and just finding a way. And like you mentioned earlier, when you're talking about how we had the mini runs and then we finally broke through, the Lakers game was similar to this one, except we just never broke through.
Mhm.
So that was another reason why this game felt good, because you kind of had a similar script on the last game they played that last Wednesday, but this time they were able to change it. And it's crazy looking at the Kings. I was about to say, and this is a similar team to the Lakers, and they're actually 9-12. This is weird. Like I still feel like the Kings are better than us.
For
Like
sure. No, I do too. I think we have a little more like what's the word I'm looking for? What do they say when it's like bust or something?
boom.
Boom. I think we have more boom potential, but we definitely have a lot more bust potential.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe by the end of the year, they're gonna obviously surpass us record wise. But as of right now, 11-9 versus 9-12, Jew, we're looking pretty good.
It's just wild to see after the past 2 years. And
Yeah.
Cowboy Tanaka brings up a good point in the comments that I
Yeah.
also wanted to mention. He said 6 minutes for Zach and Charles. That was the key. So Charles Bassey started the entire first half, and then Zach Collins came in the second half. Obviously, Wemby played the majority of the minutes at center with the type of game that he was having. But that's something to watch rotation wise. And if you don't have any other final takeaways on this one, Ethan, I think that kind of gets us into another lineup conversation. Caesar C is in the comments, and he says the starting lineup for tonight is Chris Paul, Stephon Castle, Julian Champagnie, Harrison Barnes, and Wemby. And Sohan is for sure
Yeah, he
playing
is.
tonight. So that is announced, which means he'll be coming off the bench. You remember the last episode where we talked about this and we said, we'll kind of get a trial run of Devin and Jeremy off the bench to kind of see how that looks. But it's going to be wild to see Keldon, Jeremy. This is it. This is what we were talking about. This is the 2022 starting lineup coming off
Yep.
the bench.
Minus Trey Jones, who's unfortunately out this game because of
Oh,
his
thank
injury.
you. Thank you.
No, yeah, you're good.
Because I was thinking Trey. So that probably means Blake is going to play tonight. It's one of the other things we were talking about.
He definitely might. I think it's really interesting talking about Bassey and Collins and only having 6 minutes apiece in the last game. To me, it's very apparent that we need a backup center. And if you
Yeah.
don't think it's Bassey, great. It's definitely not going to be Zach, at least long term.
Yeah.
So we'll have to keep an eye out for the trade deadline. That's something that we're going to have to address, unless we don't care this year and we'll address it in the offseason. But
Right. Through the
something
draft
that
or
needs to be
something.
addressed. I think about games like this. It's not going to be a problem tonight since Yusuf Nurkic is out. But if we were playing Yusuf Nurkic, that's a big body that tends to give us trouble that we need to be able to match up against when Victor's on the bench. But this will be an interesting game, Jude. It'll be great to finally see Jeremy Sohan back, to see if he's going to need some time to get his rhythm back or if he's going to just come in and be ready to roll.
Mhm.
Especially since he's coming in off the bench, because I feel like a lot of his success could be credited to Chris Paul and their pick and roll
Yeah.
game and getting easy baskets for Jeremy. But now he's coming off the bench, so he's not going to have CP, also not going to have Trey. So is he going to still be that offensive weapon?
He's
Coming in off
playing
the
point
bench?
guard, Ethan.
He could be. He could be. This could be what the
Oh
experiment
my
was all about. Was he's our third
god.
string point guard?
He's the
Uh,
point guard off the bench.
But yeah, right. But
Jokes,
I don't
jokes.
think chemistry is going to be a problem. I think
Yeah.
maybe potentially being a scorer that could be difficult for him. But chemistry between Keldon, him, and Devin, we know that that's there. So I'm not worried about just like half court offensive cohesion, defensive communication. I don't see that being a problem. They have the Suns favored 70% on their matchup predictor, but what's the odds, Jude? Do you have the odds in front of you?
Let me pull that up. Of course, I just took the
I think they're favored by 6.5 points, the Suns.
yes, you are right on the money.
I might take the Spurs here, Jude.
Nurkic is out and Colin Gillespie is out. It's so big emphasis on Colin Gillespie. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. I really have faith that our team defense is better to this point, that can kind of suffocate the three-headed monster of Devin Booker, KD, and Bradley Beal. I don't think we could stop them, but maybe we can minimize the others, Grayson Allen, in terms of them being offensive weapons, especially with Jeremy back, Devin back off the bench, so that we at least have faith that their bench isn't going to go crazy on us. I, I think I'm going to take the Spurs, Jude.
So the only thing that gives me pause on the Spurs tonight is that we're on the road.
That's a great point.
We are 3-5 on the road this season. The majority of our wins have come at home. Obviously, I agree with everything you said. I honestly less analysis because like I think a lot of these guys are just going to do their thing. Like we've seen Grayson Allen kill us before from three.
Yeah.
Having to worry about these other guys. I could see us slowing down a Bradley Beal. That's kind of a nature of the circumstances, though. You know what I mean? I'm saying that under the assumption that Devin Booker and KD still get theirs.
Mhm.
Nurkic being out, I think that is a big thing. Do you know who the other Suns center is off the top of your head?
Mason Plumlee, I think, or Miles Plumlee. Which one is it that's still playing?
I
Mason.
think Mason, yeah.
Mason's playing.
Okay. So that's probably who's going to be in their starting lineup. So maybe off the bench, that'll definitely be interesting to see what their center rotation will be there. Just to be completely honest, I don't know their roster off the top of my head like that to know who the
They have
Suns third
Bol
string
Bol.
center is.
I'm looking at it now. They
Okay.
have Bol Bol, and they have this guy Ozo Iguodaro. Sorry, I'm not familiar with his game. He was a second round pick last year. He's 7 feet tall.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, what I was going to say, and even with that being said, I think Jeremy Sohan can take advantage of those matchups inside the paint. That was
Mhm.
where, as much as you mentioned Chris Paul, and that is so true. Like what he was doing for Sohan is a lot. There was a lot of cleanup duty for Sohan as well.
It's
And one
true.
of the things that we talked about the last episode was next to Zach Collins or Charles Bassey, regardless of who plays tonight. Um, Jeremy Sohan is going to have an impact on the boards for the bench
Mm,
that would not be there, otherwise.
that's a great
Um,
point.
so I think the interior, as much as we have seen, Jeremy develop a little bit of a fadeaway jumper, and at times he really hasn't taken that many, but I would still say this year, he hasn't been terrible shooting the three overall when he's left open. Yes, he hasn't made every single one, but he's made an amount that satisfies me. I'll
Right.
put it that way. But even his little fadeaway turnaround jumpers, there's a lot of paint points for Jeremy, is what I'm getting at. So that's
Good point.
something off the bench that I think is of note. But just to get into the predictions, I'm going to go with the Spurs too. It feels so weird, especially when you did it. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, are we jinxing us? Is this
Yeah,
going to
what's
ruin
happening?
it? Right. But I just feel like the way that we finished that Kings game is really going to propel us into this game on Tuesday night. And I think also going back to the NBA Cup thing, like we have a chance to clinch something tonight.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of how the rest of the tournament goes, when is the last time that the Spurs have been in that situation? I know it's the NBA Cup, but this is like an opportunity for these guys. Like, hey, we can go out and really like get a meaningful win here. This is a playoff type, scenario where you can secure yourself to advance. I do want to say that there is a scenario out there. The Spurs would need a lot of help, but there is a chance that they still could advance even if they lose tonight, but they are guaranteed to be in the quarterfinals and win Group B among the Lakers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, for example. If they get the dub tonight, as well as the Phoenix Suns as well. And as much as we're talking about the Suns and how there is some apprehension with their experience and everything like that, the Suns are 11-8, Ethan. We're 11-9. We've just played one more game than them, but we essentially have the same record as them to this
Right.
point in the season, which is kind of crazy to think about. Again, going back to how I still feel like the Kings are better than us, and they have 2 more losses.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm going to go with the Spurs too, just because of that Sacramento game and the stakes. I think we're gonna show up to that moment. I think Victor will show up to that moment, especially
Mhm.
with Nurkic out.
That's a really, really good point. This will be the first time that we've actually seen them play for something. And
Yeah,
even if it is minor like the NBA Cup, like in the last 2 years, we haven't seen any like significant games or like a must win or we have to put our backs are against the wall. Finally, that's what we're able to see tonight. I agree with one of the comments. I think that matchup between Castle and Booker will be really interesting to watch. A really good learning experience and see just how mature this guy is. If he can slow down Devin Booker, he can slow down just about anybody at that position. And then also off the bench, what you had me thinking about with Jeremy, great points. I forget that they're down a center, so we're probably going to play small. Actually, I don't even know if Bassie or Collins is going to play. If it's me sitting in that chair, I play Jeremy and Mamu at the 4 and 5, and I let Mamu just pick and pop all night long.
Yeah.
Let Jeremy roll to the rim and be that paint presence, and let Mamu just snipe. And he's a guy that can catch these teams off guards because that's not necessarily somebody that you're scheming against right now, Jude.
They're probably game planning for 6 minutes of Zach Collins and 6 minutes of Charles Bassey.
Mm.
So I
That's
like
my
that.
bold prediction.
I wouldn't like that if Jeremy wasn't off the bench, but because of the circumstances, especially, and that he's going to have Jeremy next to him, I mean, effectively, almost Jeremy's kind of like a de facto center there, and you're really playing Mamu at the 4.
Exactly. And then you'll have KJ,
Mhm.
Devin, and KJ's had minutes at the 4 too, so he's not necessarily undersized. And then who I guess Blake will get if there's a 10-man rotation. We might just roll a 9-man and just
Right.
stagger the CP, Stefan, or maybe let Devin handle that point guard duties. I'm not sure how we're going to handle that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And, as much as we're talking about the young guys and the mindset changing and all that type of stuff, Ethan, honestly, the more I'm thinking about it, this is a game where Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes can have a big impact as well, where there's something to play for as well.
Stay level headed. I expect to see a lot of huddles and like moments during the game where they call everybody
Yeah.
over, them specifically, Harrison and Chris, to kind of keep everybody on track because this is going to be a big one, especially away where we haven't been successful yet. 3 and 5 on the road.
I don't want to completely change gears here, but you talked about the huddles, and that's so true. It's also been really good? The
Mm.
timeouts.
Oh yeah.
Can we give a shout out to Mitch Johnson, man? Like, I feel like that's not, I was thinking about that the last episode. Like, that's not being talked about enough. Obviously, and another 2-1 week, which for this Spurs team is, for people like us who've been paying attention, that's like a miracle, it feels like.
Yep.
But man, I mean, he's just been doing a really good job. I wish I had more analysis, Ethan, but I just don't have many complaints. He challenges when you should. He wins the majority of challenges that he uses, and
Mm-hmm.
he listens to his players. As soon as something bad's going wrong, there's a timeout or bad going on. There's a timeout immediately addressed. Even if we don't win the game, like the issue that was going on stops, at least, for a significant period of time. And he gets on the guys too.
Yeah.
Not in a demeaning way, but like I've seen him like yell at Keldon before. And it's just like, and it's after like a
Mm-hmm.
bonehead play that like, hey, you're better than that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Um, I wish I had a better way to describe it, man. But what are your thoughts on Mitch Johnson so far?
No, I've been extremely impressed, and shout out to Matt Nielsen and the rest of the coaching staff too. Matt Nielsen's been talking in his ear pretty much every single time they show him. They're kind of having small conversations on the bench, but he looks really comfortable. He's making great decisions. I don't see a real drop off, to be honest. When Pop left, I was a little nervous, like, oh, we're gonna start losing some
Right.
games on some execution things that Pop wouldn't let slide. But no, that doesn't seem to be the case. And again, not to toot our own horns, Jude, but looking back like 3 or 4 years ago when we were doing this podcast early on, and there were rumors about, who are the Spurs going to hire? Is it going to be like a big name? Are they going to poach
Right.
somebody? Is Pop going to retire? And we were both like, as much as this is fun, it'll probably just be some random guy that not anybody's heard
I
of.
think we said it's going to be Will Hardy,
Yeah, Will
who
Hardy
was an
maybe
assistant at the
at the
time.
time. Yeah, just some guy off the back bench that's going to just come up and slowly move his way up the rankings, and Pop will slowly walk out and he'll walk in, and everybody will be like, "Who's this guy?" But he'll be successful. And I'm not saying that Pop's not coming back. Obviously, I hope he does. I hope he's doing well. But if Mitch Johnson is the head coach of the future, I think we're in a really good spot.
Dude, so that was the other thing that I was thinking. Like, I know it's a small sample size, but I was like, man, maybe it's just Mitch. Maybe that's the replacement, and that would be the most Spurs thing ever. And again,
Yeah,
not to be arrogant and toot our own horn, but this is why we talk about the Spurs development staff and trusting the front office.
yep,
Yes, you've never heard of Mitch Johnson. There's not a bunch of headlines about Mitch Johnson, but what are we seeing results wise on the floor? He's been born and bred in San Antonio for the most part. When I say born and bred, I mean just like in his coaching career.
right,
Um,
right, yeah,
but this is like the most typical Spurs thing ever. So again, I want to also say, I brought this comment up earlier, Matt Wilson's comment, SSPN OG. He says, I keep reminding myself this is a young team and all caps long season. If we go on a 6-game losing streak, we're going to see people in the comments like Mitch Johnson sucks. We need Pop back or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But as of this moment right now, I mean, I had that same thought too. I was like, maybe he's just the successor and we're just going to go in-house like we always have almost, it feels like.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised at all. And one other thing, I know it's kind of, again, off topic that needs to get some consideration is shout out Victor Wembanyama. I know we don't talk about it a lot, but at the very beginning of the year, we were like kind of nervous because he wasn't playing that well.
Yeah.
And then some stupid bonehead anonymous scout came out and
Dude.
said that he wasn't impactful. And since then,
He's
bro
averaging
is
30 and 10.
on like 50+% shooting from the field and 40+% shooting from three. And
And like 6 threes a game. Yeah, at least. It's really more than that, but that's the average. I know the stat you're talking about.
we could argue all day. Is this Victor's mindset? Is it just rust that he got off? Or is it the coaching, scheming, and putting him in better spots? It's probably a little bit of everything. But Victor needs a lot of credit there. And I think the coaching staff does as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We are about to wrap up here because obviously tip off is just in 7 minutes, but I want to go and answer some of the other comments that we were talking about. I know Pison was saying there is no world when you don't have Vassell in our starting lineup. I think you and I,
Agreed.
completely agree on that. But just with the injuries and the minutes restriction, with the way the Spurs do thing, it's kind of like Caesar said. We agree. I agree, but don't hate it tonight. That's probably how we feel
Yes.
about it. Let me see some of the other comments that we've seen. Pison was also saying, I'm so ready to see Devin back in the starting lineup. You were talking about that. I mean, think about the things that's going to unlock, and especially if it's next to Castle to see. I've already enjoyed seeing them both on the floor at the same time. I'd love to see that more. Matt Wilson says, not worried about the Suns game. In the long run, we just need to focus on getting chemistry created and improving. Winning would be great, but losing isn't a big deal. Not to just say we agree with everything, but honestly, like nothing else to add. I hope we win tonight, with the stakes. It'd be cool to see, but honestly, like he's saying, that what we've seen so far, if we lose to a Suns team that has the same record than us with more veterans, like,
yeah. Ordinarily, I would say I welcome losing, but we have Atlanta's pick, so I'm chilling.
That's a really good point there too. And again, I want the Spurs to win tonight, but I get Matt's sentiment is what I'm trying to say. And again, RR210 Texas, he said, do you guys have the Suns winning this game? He heard that earlier. We both are picking the Spurs. So with that being said, we appreciate all you guys being in here tonight, hanging out with us before this Spurs game. We hope that we come back to you guys on Thursday after the Spurs have gotten a dub tonight and another dub against the Chicago Bulls on Thursday. I'm going to knock on wood, so I don't want to jinx it. But hopefully we will be coming back and seeing you guys again after that Bulls game Thursday night with a pair of wins. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. It's a long season, and it's a young team, like our guy Matt Wilson said. So we appreciate you guys. Again, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with everything on the channel, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero.